President Biden's pick for Secretary of the Interior faced intense questioning on the first day of her confirmation hearing before the Senate Energy and Natural Resources. Committee. Democratic Congresswoman Deb Haaland of New Mexico is a member of the Laguna Pueblo tribe. If confirmed, she would be the first Native American cabinet secretary in U.S. history and helm a department with broad oversight over tribal affairs and energy development.
I know how important oil and gas revenues are to critical services, but we must also recognize that the energy industry is innovating and our climate challenge must be addressed. Together, we can work to position our nation and all of its people for success in the future. And I am committed to working cooperatively with all stakeholders and all of Congress to strike the right balance going forward.
Haaland is facing tough scrutiny from lawmakers representing oil and gas producing states. She was grilled on the pause President Biden has placed on new drilling on federal lands, as well as her own support for the Green New Deal.
Your positions on energy are alarming to Mississippians. And what do you recommend I tell my constituents that are directly affected by this to assure them that their livelihoods and the way they make a living and provide for their families are still secure?
I was the most bipartisan freshman in my first term in Congress. It's important that we're able to work together, and I can just promise you that I will listen to you.
The chairman of the Energy Committee, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, has not committed to supporting the confirmation. He said in a statement that he looks forward to learning more about Haaland's views. For more, let's bring in Felicia Fonseca. She is the Northern Arizona reporter for the Associated Press and covers Native American tribes for the AP's Race and Ethnicity team. Thanks so much for joining us. So before we get into Congresswoman Haaland's hearing, remind us of the authority that the Interior Department has over Native American lands and the historical relationship between those peoples and the department.
Sure. I mean, the Interior Department has been in existence in some form for, well over 200 years. And it really oversees, millions of acres of land, including tribal reservations, but also, national parks, Bureau of Land Management, oversees coal, oil and gas development, that sort of thing. But really for Native Americans, it touches on nearly every aspect of their lives when we're talking about police forces for tribal reservations, if we're talking about Bureau of Indian Education, which runs schools in a number of states across the country. And so you're really looking at something that has broad authority over Native American affairs.
And Felicia, you wrote that news of Haaland's historic nomination, quote, electrified Indian country, you said. What did the indigenous people you spoke with have to say about a Native American woman being considered for this role?
Sure. I think for many tribes, they saw it as a long time coming, right? This agency has never been led by a Native American, and really any, department in the U.S. government in terms of cabinet secretaries. So for Native Americans, it was a long time coming. Only recently did Deb Haaland get elected as one of the first 2 Native American women in Congress. So they really see this as a time where their voices can be elevated in the tribal government, where they can push forward on long simmering issues, whether it has to do with protecting the environment, or it has to do with adequately funding some of these agencies that fall under the Interior Department to just improve conditions in Indian country.
And one issue that you wrote about of importance to Native Americans is the land back movement. Tell us what that's about and what has Representative Haaland said about it?
Sure. It's a broader movement that really talks about, for some tribal members, it's a form of reparations for Native Americans who gave up a lot of land in exchange, when the U.S. was formed, so that, they also could get in exchange, health care and public safety. And so now there's been a growing movement to at least let tribes be co-managers of some of these federal public lands where either close to their reservations or a part of their ancestral homelands. And some tribes have said, that we would like the land back outright. And one of those things that's been high on the list for many, many years is the Black Hills in the Lakota Nation.
Well, even if Congresswoman Haaland is confirmed as expected, what kind of an agenda has she alluded to enacting?
Sure, and we heard Representative Haaland this morning talk about wanting to make sure that there is some transition to renewable energy, recognizing the role that fossil fuels plays now, but to move away from that. She also talked about one of her main priorities, at least for Indian country, being expanding broadband. As we're seeing during the pandemic right now, a lot of, not only tribal communities, but rural areas are struggling. And I spoke to a woman this morning who was on a virtual watch party for the representative's confirmation hearing this morning, who said, it kept cutting out. And that speaks to, on a small scale, the problem that a lot of these places have just connecting, right, and being able to keep up with people in other places of the country.
Yeah, it would really seem to underscore sort of the idea of just connection, right, at a moment when there is this very, for that community, symbolic event taking place. So it's been really interesting to read about the impact that just her nomination has had. Felicia Fonseca of the Associated Press. Felicia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks,
Really
Elaine.
appreciate it.